All right. Welcome back to Misfit Nation. If you're a veteran and you're struggling or feel like you're heading towards a path of darkness, stop and think about those who are around you. Think about how they truly value you, how they miss you. You are not alone. You need to talk to someone. Someone will listen to you. If you feel like you'll be a burden to someone or your friends and family won't help you, call the anonymous hotline at 1-800-273-8255 and press option 1. Don't make a permanent solution to a temporary problem. If you're a new listener, thanks for joining us. Please subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast apps to include the Military Broadcast Radio app. And check out our family of shows. They're all hosted by military veterans. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel at _Misfit Nation and click the bell so you know when new episodes come out. This will all keep you up to date on our latest news episodes and, of course, the stories of our great guests. This show is part of a Memorial Day series this year, where we wanted to highlight the stories of those we have lost by bringing on those who served with them, along with the families to keep their stories alive. With that, today we have a great person with an amazing story of resilience and grit. Our next guest is a veteran of the United States Army, mother of 3, and surviving spouse of Sergeant Nathaniel Helmuth. Going from dual military to military spouse to caregiver of a wounded warrior to widow, she has run the gauntlet of military experience, making her life the perfect platform to advocate for and support others who might be facing the same challenges. She often jokes that her life could literally be a movie. If something was going to happen, it happened to us. So without further ado, let's welcome Kristle Helmuth to the Misfit Nation. Welcome, Kristle.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for volunteering to go through this with me and hang out with me here for about 30 minutes or so and share your story of your, not just you, but of course your husband, Sergeant Nathaniel Helmuth, and your kids now. So, Kristle, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your service. Thank you for your service, by the way. As a fellow Army person, it's always great to have Army people on my show.
Yeah.
And how you and your husband met and the journey you guys went on to where we are now.
Sure. So we actually met in the military. So we met both at our first duty station at Fort Riley. I was an MP and he was a combat engineer. So kind of started out our journey that way. We did the whole dual military thing for a little while. I ended up getting out after, our son was 2 years old when I got out. And, you know, I don't know, the dual military thing was a challenge in itself. And then my transition to military spouse was a little bit challenging as well, because I had no idea. I mean, I went in as an 18-year-old kid, and then here I am coming out, and just navigating all of that was really, really interesting. But I was also transitioning during a time while my husband was deployed. So that didn't make it any easier. That deployment ended up being, it was at that time frame where they extended all the deployments. So he ended up being gone for like a solid 18 months while I was transitioning from my military career. So, you get in your mind this idea of he's going to come home and everything's going to be, happy. We're going to have this, I don't know, like our story's going to be complete again, I guess. Everything's going to get back to normal. Everything's going to feel right again once he's home. So he came home, and like I mentioned before, he was a combat engineer. And so a lot of what they did was, he was a trailblazer. They were finding the IDs, they were setting them off, lots of, close impact hits on him. This was also a time where they didn't really understand the impact that those things were making, on the soldiers who were being hit with the IEDs at various distances. So he comes home dealing with some PTSD stuff, dealing with some other things that we didn't understand at the time. So it wasn't a happy reunion at first. Things got really hard, and looking back, it's like, okay, it's a good thing that this happened. He ended up being, taken out of our home at one point for, a domestic situation. And it was at that point that one of the case managers said, like, there's something else going on. Like, this is not normal. So that's when they discovered, that he diagnosed him with TBI. From there, was kind of just a journey of new diagnosis. He had COPD. They had inhaled chlorine at one point over there and never really addressed it. So breathing issues, he was blacking out, he was having seizures, like the list of things just continued to grow and grow. You know, I don't know, it just looking back on it, it's so much stuff. And it's hard to like put into words, like all the things that we went through during that time. But we got to the point where he was stable, I guess, but he was still lost. So we decided we were going to pack up everything. We were still in Kansas. We decided we were going to pack up our whole life and move to Florida for him to do Wounded Warrior Project's track program. So we come out here, we get him set up with that. He decides, he wanted to go on to achieve a lifelong goal of being a Florida Gator. So he was like, yeah, Florida is going to be the thing. We're going to do this. So he got that in his head. And so with a bunch of different tools and navigation things, we were able to successfully get him through school. There were several stops in there for hospitalizations and issues and all that stuff, but they were really good about working through those things. He graduated from UF. He got a job at Merrill Lynch. So he was seemingly, I guess from the outside looking in, you see that and you see, okay, he's doing amazing. Like all these things are falling into place, but behind closed doors, it was like we had to manage the schedule, set timers for everything. Like he had to, have notes for this or that because he was still having issues with memory and the like cognition and stuff like that. Occasionally still had seizures. So that would, depending on the time frame, would also sort of limit me because whether he was able to drive or not. But he still he just pushed through, which is one of the qualities that was best loved about him, is that no matter what he was going through, he just kept going. Like he just pushed, and it was remarkable because sometimes I would even get down on the situation and I'm like, gosh, like where do we go from here? And here he is like dealing with all this stuff and he just keeps going. So we got to the point where we just thought that everything was all good. We were just going to have to live with these situations and stuff that went on. And then January of 2018, I was in Daytona. My daughter, who was 9 at the time, was home with him, and he collapsed in the kitchen. Ultimately ended up being a heart attack that they attributed to some of the things that he was dealing with. So we found out later. I donated his brain to Boston University for the CTE research, which he didn't end up having CTE, but it was very enlightening in seeing the parts of his brain that were injured and piecing the things together. So we realized, all the things he was dealing with, the temperature regulation, the heart rate regulation, like some of these things that we could never get control over, were linked to the parts of his brain that were injured. So that was incredibly just interesting to learn about and see like, okay, this is really like all these things that we couldn't figure out are linked to something. So we weren't losing our minds when we thought that all this stuff was happening. So of course, that changed the trajectory of everything. I had no idea what I was going to do because I wasn't working at the time, just taking care of the kids and volunteering, working on my school. I don't know, when something like that happens, you don't really know what's next, and there's nobody to tell you. So lucky for me, I had an amazing support system, because without that, like I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have people to call on and people who knew the answers to some of the situations that I was facing. So difficult time. And then I learned one of the most important lessons probably of my entire life after that, and that was just that everything doesn't have to keep going the way that it was. I spent a year, almost 2 years, just doing everything in the exact way that we did before. And it was proving to be more of a struggle than anything else. And I had to step back and kind of realize like, okay, you can't do that. So I had to really like step back and like sit in my grief for a little bit and actually deal with it. Took me 2 years to actually like acknowledge that, you know, I needed like some help too. And I needed to figure out what the heck I was going to do. And like, I have to deal with this. So you can't stuff things. That was my most important lesson, is like not to stuff that. But I think I don't know. I think we've transitioned well and we're on the right path now. So long story short.
Well, like you said, it's you left the military. He left the military, and now you're outside of that support circle when this happened. But all this really happened while he was in the military, causing this to happen. So you didn't have that support network that someone, if the person's deployed and this happens, has it when it immediately happens. So you had to, thankfully, like you said, you had a support staff around you, a support group around you. You still had the mission continues around you at that point, and people were able to reach and try to help you as best they could, and try to. I mean, I know a lot of people say, "I'm here for you. I understand," but a lot of them really don't understand what you're going through at that point. But that's just how they cope with it, and there's no textbook way for you to cope. And like you said, you try to do everything the same exact way because that was your coping mechanism at that time. But you triumphantly came through, and now you're an advocate for other veterans at this time. And that's still in Jacksonville, Florida, right?
Yes, I'm still in Jacksonville, and I actually just finished my MBA, so that's exciting. I felt like it was going to take me 8,000 years to finish school at the rate I was going. And I got hired at United Way to help launch the Mission United program, which is exactly, it's exactly that. It's a support network for somebody who doesn't have the answer to something. They're able to call through 211, reach us, and I can act as like an expert navigator and say, okay, have you called, this organization? Let's call them, and see, I think that would be a good fit for you. Or if they need, depending on what the need is. And, one of the things that brought this to light for me was that, when my husband died, I didn't have a casualty assistance officer or somebody to walk me through the process. And so I'm like, there needs to be something like that for not just that specific need, but other needs too. So really glad that kind of just fell in line with what I, what I had in mind for other things. So really just played out well.
It's almost a perfect landing spot for you. Like you said, your life's almost going to move if it happens. It happens to us. It happened because it was supposed to happen. You're supposed to be in this position you're in now to now help others that may go through the same situation you were in.
Yeah.
I want to go back to when you both met. You were an MP at Fort Riley, and he was a combat engineer. You didn't happen to pull him over. Is that how you met?
No, that's not how we met. We just happened to meet. So we had both met. We met in processing actually. So, and I had CQ duty, and he had it right after me. And so it was back in the day when we had little fold up DVD players.
Oh,
So I had my little DVD player and my little book of DVDs flipping through or whatever. So I finished like my duty or whatever, and he had it after me, and he's like, "Hey, can I borrow that?" I'm like, "Sure." So he like picked a movie that I really liked or whatever, and I was like, "Hey, you mind if I hang out?" And so I just ended up like hanging out there with him for his shift too. So
wow.
yeah, kind of weird, but definitely a story kind of situation. And so yeah, we just connected after that, and then we just started hanging out, and that was the end of the story for us. So and then we were married for 13 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I was at Fort Riley. I was in 1st Engineer Battalion at Fort Riley for about 3 or 4 years during my 6 years of imprisonment at Fort Riley, and because they wouldn't let me go, and so that's why I asked that question.
Yeah, when were you there?
99 to 05.
Okay, so yeah, we got there in 04.
Yeah, so right when I was.
And he was at 1st Engineers also.
I was deployed with Bravo Company.
Okay.
So see, small world. We connect again.
Definitely.
So with your now you have 3 kids now. varying ages now, right? So down to still a toddler or?
Yeah, so my first two, they're 16 and 13, and those are with my husband. And then, I'm in a new relationship now, and so we have a 1-year-old together. Yeah, so interesting. Yep, it's a good time because we have the big kids who can help with the baby, and everybody just loves it. So it's really been it's been a blessing too. And as weird as it is, like she actually has, a piece of Nate in her, in the way that we were connected. And so part of his whole thing, like even before mission continues and all that stuff, like his big thing was, oh, Charlie Mike, like all the time. So it's tattooed on my arm, and we actually put it on his headstone. And now the baby's name, she has 2 middle names, and it's Charlie Grace, so she has a piece of him too.
I mean, that's good. You have the in-house babysitters. That's good. And so
Yes.
you can go out and be adults at times and
Exactly.
sort of not worry, even though you're going to worry anyways. That's what moms do. Moms worry about all the time. So that's your job.
Right.
Current job and be a mom. And then now with your advocacy, do you also go outside the United Way and still do things with other veteran organizations now?
Yes, yeah. So I'm still heavily involved in a lot of things, still doing some stuff with Mission Continues. I've picked up some stuff with the Concussion Legacy Foundation, just being part of like their support groups and stuff for people who have donated their brains. So that's really just kind of a interesting place that I've found. And then also, I found a place in working with widows, whether they're military widows or not, just connecting with them, because you don't realize until it happens to you how many there actually are. It's tremendous. And then the things that people have to go through, like, I find myself incredibly blessed in the way that everything played out for me, but some people have to fight really hard for benefits. Some people don't have them at all. There's different varying situations of like the life insurance situation and planning and stuff like that, that really, you lose a sole provider and you can instantly lose everything that you have. So really just advocating for that population as well has become really important to me.
So now you're like the trailblazer for that on that side. So you continue his Charlie Mike, but since you have it on, it's emblazed on you.
Right.
So
Right. You just have to, like, you can't stop now. It's already like permanent there. So
or there, it's pushing you forward and you're helping others where you didn't really necessarily have the exact help you needed, but you had help. But now you can actually open that window and say, hey, look, been there. This is what you need to be doing at this point and push you forward. That's great. And it's great that you were able to come up, standing up and be the great person you are now. So now, if you had to say your greatest memory of Nathan pre that deployment, what would that be?
Just him becoming a dad for the first time. I think, I have some pictures of right after he was born, and it's really funny because his platoon leader and his platoon sergeant came to see us, at the hospital up there. And so he's just like, it was before I had come out of recovery because I had a C-section. And so the picture was taken by someone else. I don't know, but he's just got the baby and he's just like looking at him, and you can just see like the love in him. And so just the way that he was a dad, even all the way through, his last days, like that was what he lived for, was just being a dad to these kids and leading them and guiding them through their lives. So
that's a great memory. And I'm sure being a first time dad and the shock and awe on his face probably is amazing in that picture, saying, oh, now I have this to,
like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Yeah. So I never forget that. And then my other favorite memory of him is that, like, I'm extra sometimes, and I get these big ideas of all these things and all these people I want to help and all these like big grand adventures. And so we have what was called the Nate look, and it was kind of like you want to do what? Like, so that was another, just a fun memory that we always have of him, because everybody who knew him just kind of knew that, like, he was my balance. He was my, like, okay, let's take it down a notch and like look at like, okay, you want to bring, 20 people to your house and do this, but think about, where are you going to put them? Like, he would just bring me down and say, like, balance me out a little bit. So everybody kind of knew that about him, and they knew the Nate look. And so sometimes, I'll do something and somebody else will give it to me, and I'm just like, really, you just had to do that right now? But it's great.
It helps you pump your brakes. That's good.
Yes.
Want to bring 30 puppies home. It's a great idea to do somewhere else.
Yes. Like, you don't have the space for that, or it's going to cost this, or, there were a lot of times like where I just did, I don't know, one time I can think of, we were at the homeless veterans stand down, and they had brought in all of these like gear. It was like military gear and stuff that they were handing out, blankets, like woobies and rucks and stuff to all the homeless who were coming into the stand down. And so at the end of it, they were going to spend the money to box all this extra stuff back up, put it in a truck, and ship it to like New York or something. And I was like, I was platoon leader then, and I was like, why would you, like, that doesn't make sense to me. That's why. And they're like, well, we have nothing, we have nowhere to put it, we have nothing to do. And I was like, no problem, I will get a U-Haul, I will get a storage unit, and I will put it in there, and we will give it to the people here. And so in my mind, this was a great idea. It was a lot of stuff, like a lot of stuff. And he was like, because I called him after, and he was like, you did what? I'm like, well, okay, now we got a lot of projects in front of us, but yeah, it was funny.
We can make it happen.
Yeah.
It does make a lot more sense to keep the stuff there in Florida,
Right.
where you collected it, instead of shipping it basically across the country to New York.
Right. I'm like, that's expensive.
Expensive, and there's people there that need it.
Exactly.
Or New York and have a service project to do the same thing. So what are your what's advice would you give to someone that is going through kind of like the wave that you two were going through when they didn't know what was wrong with him, and how to get through that, and then of course the aftermath of when he did finally go to the other side?
Yeah. So, I mean, the number one thing, through his health journey was just advocating for him. You get a lot of pushback sometimes, and you just have to push through it, because sometimes it takes like getting to the right person to get the right answer. I mean, we would have never known that anything was even wrong with his brain unless we got to the right person. So that, and then just, there's tools and there's things available. Technology is incredible. For things to keep you, I don't know, keep you being able to do things. You don't have to give up because you're facing all of these challenges. There's ways and pathways for everybody to be able to still meet their goals. And then just, talking to other people. I think I learned a ton by talking to other like spouses and stuff who were dealing with the same kinds of injuries. And even now, like talking to somebody who is just newly diagnosed and giving them, the tidbits of things that I'm able to give them. It was sort of like that same pathway that led me to know and understand what was actually going on with him, so that we could ask the right questions to the doctors, get to the right doctors, and just really push for treatment. And then, leading, I guess, post death, my best advice is just that no journey looks the same. It's different for literally every person. So people are going to give you unsolicited advice all the time. You take the little bits of stuff that you can apply to your life, and you use that, and you send the rest elsewhere. And then just really, like, if I would have known back then, I don't know, I guess you can't really predict, but you just want to make sure that you're making the most of every moment in your life, because you never know when it's going to change. It could change at any second. And I know we always think about like somebody's legacy as a person who is older, and like we're carrying on my grandpa's legacy, but like thinking of the legacy of a 36-year-old person like really puts it into perspective as to what that means. And so living a life that is going to be your story, whether you pass away at 31 or 99, I think is key. Just living the best that you can.
That's great advice for both sides of that question. I tried to word it correctly without messing up with that. Hopefully I did it well, and you did. You you vocalized it way better than I did. And all that advice is good. And hopefully listeners out there, if they're going through any of this, listen to that and understand. And I really liked it. After he passed, you did have his brain scanned to see, but maybe there was a correlation to what was going on. And that opened your eyes to say, hey, yeah, this frontal lobe or wherever was causing this. And that's something, I don't even know if you can test that while we're alive, or they have to have the additive body, but that's something that would be great to know for a lot of guys and girls right now who have been blown up overseas or in wrecks in the States that have concussions right now, and they're not totally diagnosed as CTE or TBI, but they're having those issues.
They have a really incredible program for both CTE and like TBI research and resources and stuff on their website. Just really, really remarkable. And then another thing that kind of led us to that path, there was actually I can't remember which news station it was actually airing a piece on Boston University and their brain stuff that was supposed to air the day after he died. So we set it to record so that we could watch it together. Just totally like ironic. And so that, we had kind of talked about it. And that kind of like led me to that decision even more, but we just always knew that that was going to be something that we wanted to do so that we could help others who may come down that path. I mean, when he first got injured, we didn't know the impacts. And so kind of like, I guess at the mark of his death, I think there was around that time was a really big push for the education and the understanding of that. And now, being even further out, using all of that knowledge, I think is going to be beneficial to helping people while they're alive. Rather than having to wait until that happens to understand it fully.
Actually, that's awesome right there. And I have to look up Boston University now to see all the stuff they're doing to actually put this out on the show for others as well, and another show to do that. So yeah. Have you come back on and talk about Boston University for about 30 minutes, if you're willing.
For sure.
Awesome. Kristle, thank you again for taking some of your time today to share Sergeant Nathaniel Helmuth's story with us and your family story with us, your resilience, your grit to get through this, and show others that there is a way out and a better path after.
Thank you.